Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this weekend's edition of BookBytes. We have a really thought-provoking topic, but a serious and something that gets to the heart of the issue of land, the contentious issue, rather, I should say, of land reform and land restitution in South Africa, in post-apartheid South Africa. Something that we might think to some degree has been given due consideration, and yet we have a very significant document, a new publication by award-winning journalist Lucas Ledwaba, A Desire to Return to the Ruins, which presents a few of the case studies that get to the heart of the matter, but also give us a very highlighted view of the fact that land restitution considers to be a significantly difficult to address issue, and in a long drawn issue as well. A Desire to Return to the Ruins looks at the issue of land reform and restitution. It tells the stories of communities engaged in a battle to regain land forcefully taken away from them and their forebears during the apartheid years. The stories range from successful claims that have turned communities against one another, their long struggle against government's bureaucracy, and the political wrangling around the land issue. Lucas Ledwaba is an award-winning author, publisher, journalist, editor, photographer, and documentary filmmaker. He's the founder and editor of the media agency Mukurukuru Media. Ledwaba is a two-time winner of the CNN Multi-Choice African Journalist Awards in 2010 and 2013 for his coverage of the battle against HIV/AIDS and his coverage of the Marikana massacre. After starting his foray into journalism with a brief stint as a trainee at Soshanguve Community Radio, Ledwaba has worked as a reporter and news editor at various publications, including Sunday Times, Sunday World, Sunday Sun, City Press, Drum Magazine, the Sowetan, the royalty really of political institutional paper in South Africa. And his work has been published widely, both locally and internationally. Mr. Ledwaba's writing focuses on issues of social justice, human rights, rural development, land reform and land rights, travel, tourism, arts, culture, heritage, and history, among other issues. He is also awarded for his feature writing in the Standard Bank Sikovile Journalism Awards, the Vodacom Journalism Award for feature writing, and the Pika Magazine Publishers Public Interest Writer of the Year. A Desire to Return to the Ruins is today's focus. Good evening, Mr. Ledwaba, and thank you for joining us to give us an insight into this brilliant new publication.
Good evening, Shafinaaz. Thank you for inviting me to your show, and good evening to all the viewers who took the time to tune in.
We look forward to, like I said, it's a significant and deep and perhaps dark topic, especially when you hear about the kind of frustration that families and communities have felt since already from the 90s when claims were set, when so many thousands of claims were put forward for land restitution, for ancestral land to be returned to communities. Tell us about your research, about delving into your research and what this journey has been for you.
It has been a very difficult journey. In the Constitutional Court judgment, Lamosa judgment by Judge Mbuyiseli Madlanga, he alludes and he makes the point that land reform and restitution is a very emotive issue that impacts on the lives of millions of people. So as a researcher and a writer, going into the hearts and minds of those people, asking them to open up about their experience, about their pain, about their wishes, has been a very draining exercise. And I think if you go through the book, you will find that most of the people that I interviewed are old people. So these are the people who experienced firsthand the brutality and violence of forced removals of land dispossession. There are people who are in the, one could say, in the final stages of their lives, and they have only one wish: to return to the ruins of their fathers, their grandfathers, their great grandfathers, where they were born, where they grew up. So it is a very personal story, but it's also a story that gives you a broader picture about the challenges that uh, the challenges around the issue of land reform and land restitution in South Africa.
Well, one gets a very emotional sense of, firstly, the difficulty of having land torn from communities, from individuals, ancestral land, as you said, and more than kind of the sort of economic strain. There's a very deep cultural and personal, emotive kind of strain, the spiritual aspect of losing ancestral land, which you allude to in a few of the examples. This is a human rights issue on a number of levels. Speak to us about that very emotive, very the loss of the spiritual aspect, those bonds that have broken through the loss of land. Maybe less so, not to take away the value, but less so the economic kind of aspect. Just generations having lost that strength, that bond with the land.
Mm. Well, in the book, I delve into the aspect of land and spirituality, where people say land is not just a piece of land where we build our home, where we go back to sleep after work. It is much more than that. And I'm sure you'll agree with me that throughout history, many wars have been fought over land. Um, in the African context, and I want to believe that throughout the world, land, when you go to the Native Americans, the Native Indians, you go to Palestine and Israel,
Indeed.
land is at the center of most of the battles, but also the spiritual aspect is there because people feel they belong to the land. They feel that the land is God. So once you uproot them from that ancestral land, you are creating a very big problem. You are disconnecting them from their roots. You are disconnecting them from their connection to the past. So that was the case in South Africa. Uh, According to research in South Africa, between 1950 and 1983, more than 3 million people were forcibly removed from their land. You can imagine the impact of that. 3 million people uprooted without notice, illegally, and thrown into strange areas. So, in the book, people talk about how the disconnection from the land also led to a disconnection with their spiritual being because people believe that the land is God. Their forebears who are buried here are, in a way, looking after them. But when they are uprooted without notice, then it creates a disconnection between the living and those that have passed on. In the uh, African traditional religion, as they call it, when a child goes away to varsity or somebody goes away from home, from the village or from the township to another area to seek work or to start schooling, they first have a ceremony where they announce to the ancestors to say, so and so is leaving us, is going to Wells afar. Please go with him, look after him or look after her, go with her. In the context of forced removals, people never had an opportunity to perform those sacred rites to connect with the elders to say, we are being taken away. When or if you are looking for us, you will find us at ABC. That never happened. So the issue of spirituality is not only in South Africa, throughout Africa. People are saying, once we were uprooted, we lost our being, we lost our connection with our forefathers, we lost our humanity. We were cut off from our spirituality because when we are born, the umbilical cord is buried in the ground where we are born. But now, in the middle of the night, here comes the Kwela Kwela, the GG, the government truck, the soldiers and police with guns. They're kicking us out. We don't have the time to do that. So when you look at the last 60, 70, or 100 years of forced removals, and I'm not saying forced removal started 100 years ago. It started long time ago, more than 300 years ago. But when you look at the last 100 years, so many people were moved around District 6, Lady Selborne, Mala Mala, Northern Transvaal, now Limpopo. People were just taken out of the land and the life that they knew and thrown into strange places. That dehumanized people. It led to a lot of people feeling lost, having no sense of belonging, and also depressed. In the book, we I look at the issue, for instance, of Malamala. There's Mr. Shinganyiso Marimani, who died at the age of 97 before he could reap the fruits of the land claim that his family and his community put in. His wish was that he wants to be taken back to be buried alongside his father, his grandfather, because that is where he comes from. He feels spiritually he's no longer connected with them. So the spiritual aspect is very huge. You look at how the violence in the townships in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even up to now, where does it come from? Is it because people feel this unexplainable anger, this unexplainable disconnection to a point that they no longer care? They just become self-destructive. So that is one of the aspects that we look at in the book.
And we get a sense when you speak about generational trauma that goes back. I mean, it's not, the elders experienced that disconnect, that theft of ancestral land, but the youth is experiencing the results of that trauma as well. By experiencing the disconnect, by experiencing the anger, and by not having those connections to the land and the ancestral aspect of it as well. So, I mean, a lot needs to be restored. When we look back at the legalities, there seems to be, when you write very vividly and you document in detailed form what happens in the 90s when a timeline is given for a certain amount of claims that come through. In fact, something like, is it 80,000 claims made by 1998? And many of those, one wonders what percentage of those actually have had some positive regard, because it seems to be a case of frustrating the claim process in a way by waiting out until the elders are no more. In one or two of your cases, you already say that the claimants have passed on, or there's a last claimant left. Speak to us about the legalities around land claims and what these well-meaning initiatives have turned out to be in the long term. If people are still waiting 2 decades later, what has happened in that time? Can you speak to us about some of these statutory kind of frustrations, the delay tactics, the sort of around that?
No, thank you for the question. I think the reality is that after 27 April 1994, everyone expected that, well, the land was taken away. There's now the Restitution of Land Rights Act 22 of 1994. People are given an opportunity to submit claims to help them get restoration, restitution, or some form of monetary compensation for land that was taken away from them. But from where I'm sitting as a writer and as a journalist, I want to believe that at that particular moment in 1994, everyone from government to civil society to ordinary people underestimated the enormity of the issue of land restitution and land reform. And I'll tell you why. In the book, we talk about the parliamentary report that noted that between 1995 and 1998, 31 December 1998, the deadline for submission of land claims, there
Right.
were 65,000 land claims submitted to the Restitution of Land Rights Committee. Now, when you think about 65,000 claims, that's a lot. You are
Yeah.
talking about 9 provinces. You are talking about 65,000 claims, which some were made by individuals, some were made by a collective, some were made by companies, CPAs, sorry. So you look at whether the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform and the Commission for Restitution on Land Rights had the capacity to address 65,000 land claims. I don't think so. And the evidence is there. When you look at, for instance, in the book, we deal with the Mulele community land claim. They submitted the claim in 1997. It was submitted by Mr. Mulele Sr. He passed on. The claim was not settled. His son has taken over, and now he's also wary. We interviewed the daughter of Mr. Mulele, who was not born when the land claim was submitted to the commission. She still hasn't seen any progress. So that story repeats itself over and over in different communities. So you are dealing with families that, number one, mostly are poor. They do not have the resources to engage lawyers to maybe help them fast track or go to court and challenge the commission or the department. We are dealing with people who were uprooted and scattered different parts of the country. Some have lost contact, some have lost that sense of family and community. So it becomes very difficult for people to come together and deal with the land claims decisively. So the land claims court every week, every month is hearing cases relating to land claims where communities are dissatisfied or they are fighting amongst themselves. So it's a very, very difficult issue that still requires more time. And government blundered, I think, in 2014 under pressure. I think the African National Congress, under pressure from the economic freedom fighters, they voted with the economic freedom fighters to, under pressure from the EFF, which was a newly formed party, then they pushed through a parliament motion to amend the Restitution of Land Rights Act 22 of 1994 so that people could submit claims. But that was a problem because you still have thousands of outstanding claims from 1997. And then because you are going towards an election and there's a new kid on the block who's making all the right noises about land, you now open up this process again. So what then happened is that some of the claims that are still outstanding from 1997, people made counterclaims. Some of the claims that were settled, people made counterclaims. But fortunately, the matter went to court the Lamusa judgment, the Constitutional Court ruled that government should first deal with the claims that were submitted in 1998 before they can reopen the process again. So that has created already a very big problem where communities are expecting that, well, we didn't know, or we didn't have the resources or the knowledge before 1998. Now we are waiting for feedback on the claims that we submitted in 2014. So the land issue has also become a political football. Right now, there's no election looming in the horizon. It's very quiet. But we are going to an election in 2024. And I can guarantee you that the land issue is still going to be top of the agenda, because everyone will suddenly wake up and say, hey, hang on, we still have this unresolved issue. Then after the election, it's forgotten again.
So there's a little bit of political appeasement because they know that's what gets the community. I mean, it's at the heart of a lot of matters. I mean, in the Molele case, the young lady is also very sort of, it's become part of her family trajectory, to see that there's a settlement to their claim. And it's, as a young person who, as you said, wasn't even born when her grandfather made the claim in the first place. When we talk about financial compensation in the place of land, I mean, we've already spoke about the significant value attachment we put to cultural and ancestral land. And there's no, in some cases, there's no way you can put a price to it. But at the same time, as frustrating as the situation is, are later generations perhaps seeing it, as a possibility to find some closure, to regain some kind of financial compensation? How these processes work, and how this would come to pass, like as you rightly pointed out, so having tens of thousands of cases to deal with is beyond capacity. But it just shows that there is this amount of need in their case. What has it been like? I mean, you've had the wonderful opportunity, perhaps the difficult task as well, of speaking to people directly involved, communities directly involved. What is the feeling around financial compensation in the case where government is not able to settle these claims?
Well, most of the uh, financial settlements were around land claims from urban areas. For instance, in Tembisa, the township was founded in the late 1950s, but there were people who were living there as farmers, commercial farmers, very successful commercial farmers. You go to an area like West Rand, Roodepoort in Johannesburg, there was a township there called Dulile location. People were forcibly removed there. Now that area is suburbia. There's a very big shopping mall there, but the graves are still there. So what happened is that people were uprooted from Lady Selborne, from Sophia Town. They're taken to Meadowlands, to Garangua, Winterveld, and 40 years later, 30 years later, there's a new government. People put in land claims. But that is like people who are already very old, or when the forced removals happened, they were still very young. But they still have the connection to the land where they were born. So, in the end, because people cannot go back to re-establish their homes in the areas from where they were forcibly removed, because they are developed now. There's, for instance, in Olifantsfontein, it's an industrial area now. So people can't go back there. So it's a very big problem, because one family, 10 people have to share an amount of 60,000 rand. When you look at it, it's another injustice, perhaps maybe an even greater injustice than the initial one committed by apartheid. Because if a family of people that were abused, violated, has to share 60,000 rand, everyone gets 5,000 rand. Can you really say that is justice? Can you really put monetary value on the pain and suffering of a people who had committed no crime at all? Their only crime in the eyes of the then government was that they are either too close to white people or they are sitting on land that government feels can be better utilized for something else. So the issue of financial compensation in the book, we deal with it. The former president, Jacob Zuma, uh, did speak out and said to people, try to urge people not to settle for financial compensation, but rather opt for land. But in most cases, you find that people have moved on 30 years, 40 years, dynamics have changed. You look at the issue of District 6, people were removed and taken to different parts of the Cape Flats. The young people generally don't have a connection to District 6. It's the older generation, but they too no longer have that power. The will is there, but they don't have the power to start all over again. So it's a very difficult issue to deal with.
I think our history as South Africans is riddled with so many of these stories that are embedded in the hearts. It's a case of disempowerment, and many are heartbroken. And there's some sentiment, but as you say, the elders have lost that power that to be able to have some restoration of the dignity, their land, and a space that they once called home. And you've definitely captured that in so many ways in a desire to return to the ruins. I hope that it's a significant documentation of our history and of the kind of conversations we need to be having. And I congratulate you. I hope that many of our young and older generations will be reading this important publication. Thank you so much, Mr. Ledwaba, for the time you've given us this evening to get into and to give us insight into this very important publication.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you to people who have tuned in. I hope it was worth their while. And remember, the book is available at Exclusive Books and other bookstores. It retails at a recommended price of 300 rand. And remember, we have the book launch on Thursday in Johannesburg, Exclusive Books, Rosebank, at 6:30. Thank you so much.
We look forward to that. And I know that you're based in my hometown, Polokwane. Will you be having a launch in Polokwane as well?
The idea is to have launches in all the communities that are covered in the story. So, yes.
Absolutely. So we'll watch your social media pages and your publisher, Blackbird Books, for more information. With that, thank you once again for your insight, and assalamu alaikum and peace from us, and every best wish with your journey on this book.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you very much. And that was Mr. Lucas Ledwaba with his new book, A Desire to Return to the Ruins. That's it from us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.